Anyway, I'm going to talk today about Idaho and whether or not it's a good place for software developers. Like many of you in the audience, we're also trying to hire software developers, and there are lots of opportunities, and I totally agree with Bob's statement that it's a great time to be in the software business, but it requires talent. So that's the question. And we dug into it a little bit because we're concerned about it, and our developers are concerned about it, and probably some of you are as well. But after looking into it, we found out that it is. So there you go. Any questions? Any questions?
I got a question.
What? Already?
Are you supposed to talk about something more than that?
Oh, sorry. Well,
All right.
I could go into it more if you want.
That'd be good.
Okay, sorry. So I guess we'll dig into it a little bit. There are places that everyone knows are great places for developers. There are, like Silicon Valley is one of the examples, but there are other centers where they have clusters of software firms. And so I'd like to talk for a minute about traditionally what do people think it takes to be a good place for software developers. And some of these things you can see. One of the key things is you want a lot of good job opportunities. So a place like Silicon Valley, it's got critical mass. There are lots of firms. If you end up going there, let's say you're studying in Nebraska, you graduate from college, you move out to Silicon Valley, and it doesn't work out. Well, you're not stuck. You've got hundreds of other options. And that's a big thing for software developers. You want to have options. You want to have a backup plan. You want to be able to mitigate the risk. So that's a big deal. Having a good culture at the individual firm is important too, but I'm not going to talk about that. I just want to talk about it from the state level. There are other things too. You also want to be paid well, but a big part of being paid well is how much do you have left after you paid to have yourself live. And so some of those places are better on the pay scale, but also higher on the cost of living scale, so you have to evaluate that. But that's part of it, and I think Silicon Valley is actually a good place in that regard. Many people think so. They've obviously got a lot of software developers there. Good climate, but of course there are disadvantages too. If you've ever driven around there, and we have many of our clients are in that area, we go see people like Google and Apple, and it's a pain to get around, and it's hard to get to work. And the companies go out of their way to make it so if you want to eat, sleep, drink, live at work, you can. And in fact, the last time I was at Google, they said one of the problems they had is some people never left, and so they actually had to start a policy to say, no, you can't actually live here. So you can be here a lot of the time, but just because they had laundry, they had showers, they had gyms, they had everything, but they don't actually want you to live there. They just want all the time you're awake, they want you to be working for them. Not everyone wants that. Some people want a balanced life. But let me be clear. Some people do want that. There's an excitement at that, and there's an attraction. And if that's what you want, there are a lot of opportunities for that. Idaho has a different package of pros and cons. I think Idaho is a great place to live. I assume many of you think that, or there wouldn't be as many of you here. But there are a lot of things to do. Beautiful place. The mountain tax might be an issue, so you have to also deal with what's the cost of living versus compensation equation. What does that look like? But I can say we've been aggressively recruiting. Our firm has been aggressively recruiting at other universities across the country, and we've been in many other markets. We went to Bozeman, we went to Logan, we went to North Dakota, a bunch of other places, and in all of these places that we went that had similar cost of living equations to Boise, the compensation was not as high. So I think on average our compensation is going to be a fair amount lower than Silicon Valley, for example, or than Portland, or than Seattle. But relative to other places with similar cost of living, I think we have a very good equation. So in that sense, I think it is a pretty good place. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is the traditional equation. But I think the bottom line from that is there are reasons to be in Boise, there are reasons to be in Silicon Valley, and a lot of it comes down to personal preference. But one of the big reasons not to be in Boise used to be there weren't many options. If you go back 20 years, there wasn't the same vibrancy in the software development community that there is today. Today, if you're working for Clearwater and you decide that you don't like it, well, you can go down one floor, and there's White Cloud Analytics. And that's a great firm, too. And it's, sorry? Great. Well, I'm worried about that, actually. I hope some wander up, but anyway, you never know. But the point is there are options, and you're not stuck. And that makes it easier to attract talent from out of state. And we, of course, want to develop talent in state, too, but part of it is this a good place to be? And I think the answer in that sense is yes. But I want to talk about other things about Idaho. So if you look at the history of Idaho, Obviously, there were Native Americans living here for a long time, and I don't know how long, and I don't have a good read on that history because not a lot of it's written, so can't tell you much about that. So I want to start with the early explorers. Some of the early explorers that came to Idaho and the Northwest, back maybe even pre-Wild Wild West days, were looking for opportunity. These were people who understood consequences. They actually embraced consequences. And I think some of us think of consequences as a bad term. We're familiar with the phrase, suffer the consequences. Maybe you've heard that from your parents. Maybe you've used that on your kids. But that kind of gives it an asymmetrical bad name because there are good consequences too. And when you take a risk, you can succeed or you can fail. And actually there's a whole range, you can be anywhere in between. But these were people who understood consequences, the early people who came to Idaho. They were willing to take a risk in order to try to take advantage of what they perceived to be a great opportunity. And many people in Idaho are still that way. Obviously, there were consequences sometimes that were really negative, and we'll talk about risk management in a little bit. One of the big things about trading derivatives is you have to understand risk management. That's the big part of the job, is you're managing a huge portfolio of derivatives. Risk is the primary concern, and actually, it's a big concern in business too, so I want to talk about that for a minute. But I want to give you one story. Many of you are familiar with this story, the story of John Coulter. This picture of him is one I could find on the internet, and it happens to have him very well dressed. But the story I'm talking about is maybe not as well dressed. And it's a quick story. The story, you may have heard it before. He was he was one of the lead guides on the Lewis and Clark expedition, but later he was a trapper. And he and a friend of his, or a partner at least, were out trapping, and the Blackfoot Indians caught them. And there were just two of these guys, and there were over 100 warriors. And so they had him get out of the canoe, and his partner decided not to get out of the canoe, so he pushed back into the river, didn't want to be captured. They shot him with an arrow, and he shot back and killed one of the Indians. So out of the 100 Indians, they're not all good shots, so he only was hit with about 60 arrows, but that was enough. So he's done. And Coulter had a better opportunity. They gave him the opportunity. They took all his clothes, everything, shoes, everything, totally naked. And they said, okay, head start for you. And they let him run across the plains, about 6 miles to the river. And so he's running with 100 Indians running after him. They've got shoes. There are a lot of prickly pears in that part of it's the headwaters of the Missouri River. There are a lot of prickly pears on the ground there. And so, his feet are getting ripped up, and he's having a hard time. But he's got some good incentive, right? He's got some good incentive to run fast, and he's motivated. So he runs pretty fast. And he gets away from most of them, but, in a group of 100, there are going to be some fast ones and slow ones. You don't worry about the slow ones, but there are a few fast ones, and one of them almost catches him. Starts to get close to him, and he's running out of gas after 5 miles. He's got a mile left to go to the river, so he quickly turns around and jumps back at the guy. And the guy tries to throw his spear, but he's tired too. And no one knows exactly how it happened, but the spear broke, and Coulter ended up getting the spear, killing the Indian, and then taking off with 99 Indians after him. And they're closer now because that took a little bit of time. Goes and jumps in the river, hides under the logs, and there's a log jam in front of this island, and so he gets under there where his head's out of the water and he can breathe, but he can't be seen. And they search for him all day, and whooping and hollering, talk about burning all the wood and everything, but they don't, and they end up not catching him. And so, good news, he made it. Bad news, he's about 7 days from civilization, and he's totally naked with no tools because the spear's back at the Indian. He has nothing. And so he had to figure out how to get back to civilization, which he did. So I bring this example up for a couple of reasons. First, it's an example of some of the things that you need to have, some of the characteristics you need to have as a successful entrepreneur, and I think as a successful software developer, at least the kind of developer that we're looking for. We're looking for people that want to take risks, not just crazy risks. We don't want somebody who just wants to jump off a bridge for the excitement of it. We want somebody who wants to take advantage of opportunities, doesn't want to give up the consequences of success in order to have someone else take away the consequences of failure. And we also want someone who is willing to adapt to whatever the situation demands, which in Coulter's case you would call ingenuity. In our case, we'd call it innovation. To me, those are very similar concepts. And those are the people that can help each other and their firms take advantage of whatever opportunities are in front of them. And I believe what Bob was just talking about. There are a lot of opportunities, and it is a great time to be in software development, or a great time to be a software firm. There are lots of opportunities for lots of firms. And it's a big market, and we can all help each other. There's plenty of opportunity. But most of those opportunities are missed. And I want to talk for a minute about why those opportunities are missed. And I think there are lots of reasons. But 3 of the reasons, oh, that's not it. You know what? I was gonna talk about this for a minute, but we'll skip over this. But I think lots of people, when they think about early Idahoans, we have the impression as just kind of backwoods, mountain hicks or whatever. And okay, there are people, all sorts of different people everywhere, and that's totally fine. But if you look at some of the early pioneers of Idaho, say a guy like J.R. Simplot that we heard about, or Joe Albertson, and there are thousands and thousands of others. A lot of these people, you wouldn't really call them hicks because they might not know a lot of things, but many of them know their thing very well. They know their farm. They know their ranch. They work really hard, and they figure it out, and they innovate. They find ways to make it better. They find ways to not only survive but thrive in a harsh environment. And that's the kind of people who built this state. It's also the kind of people who built many other states. California was built that way. Some of those other states have lost a little bit of that edge, and I think Idaho still has a little more of it, which is a great thing. But I want to talk about opportunity. One of the reasons that people miss opportunities is because they don't see them, or they see them but they don't notice it's an opportunity. This first quote isn't really the right quote, but I really like the quote, so I tried to squeeze it in anyway. So I twisted it around a little bit. The way I would paraphrase that is to say, from Winston Churchill, and I think it doesn't mangle the meaning, to say, men occasionally stumble upon opportunities, but most of them pick themselves up and hurry off as if nothing had happened. And I really like that quote because I think we run into a lot more opportunities than we realize. There's another concept, and people say that opportunities are often disguised as hard work, which is the second one. And sometimes we end up saying, well, here's a problem. I've got a big problem. I've got this big area of the country with no map, so no one knows what's there. That's the problem. A guy like John Coulter says, well, that's your problem. That's my opportunity to solve that problem and figure it out. And I'll make the map, right? Software development, same thing. Many problems you see that people struggle with, we can say, well, that may be a problem for somebody else. That's an opportunity for us. We can solve that. So we're willing to work hard. The other problem is some people see the opportunity but are not willing to work hard to take advantage of it. And as we all know, it takes a lot of hard work and perseverance, and almost always takes longer than you think. It almost always actually takes longer than 2 weeks, even though lots of times you hear it only will take 2 weeks. We had a guy who would say 20 seconds. I don't know why. He never got anything done in 20 seconds, but he'd say that. The other thing I want to talk about, though, is lots of times we see the opportunity, we're willing to work hard, but it's too scary. It's too risky. We say, well, what if it didn't work? When we think of all these scenarios why it wouldn't work. And that's why I love this quote from John Wooden. It's, things turn out best for those who make the best of the way things turn out. And that's a different attitude towards risk. It's not an attitude of, I'm willing to take some risk in order to get the opportunity, which is good in its own. That's a good attitude also. But it's more of an attitude that I'm not only willing to take the risk, but even while I'm managing the risk, I'm trying to find every opportunity to do a better job with it, right? Whatever struggle you find yourself in. And you find that, I think, in almost any company that you're trying to develop. You have an opportunity, you try and take advantage of it. Along the way, you run into other problems. And many of those are just problems. But many of those are also opportunities. And also, we learn things and we adapt. And so being able to adapt, I think, and adapt quickly to changing circumstances is a key part of managing risk, which a lot of risk is just uncertainty. You don't know what it's going to be. So you have to be ready and change as you go. So I want to end with the Clearwater view of the original question, which is Idaho a good place for software developers? And the Clearwater view is similar to the traditional view, which is there are a lot of important issues. Are there enough firms, or is there enough opportunity? Is the compensation high enough relative to the cost of living? On those fronts, I think for many people, the answer is yes, it's a good place. And for others, the answer is no. They don't care to be in the mountains. They would love to be in the office all day. They want to be in the middle of just a place where it's just a buzz 24 hours a day about what's going on with the software. And for those, maybe Idaho's not the best place. But for many people, Idaho is a great place. But the Clearwater view encompasses some of these other things I've been talking about, which is there are other parts of a place than just these factors. And a big part of it is what kind of attitude there is with the people around you. And I think Idaho is still a place. Idaho, it's not the Wild West anymore. It really isn't. And some ways that's sad. In many ways, that's a good thing. No one's going to shoot you when you walk out because you were spitting tobacco on them or something. But it is still a place where individual liberty and individual responsibility are valued and respected, and where there's opportunity, and where there is also opportunity to suffer or enjoy the consequences of your work. And because of that, we firmly believe Idaho is a great place for developers. It's a great place to be a developer already. It's a great place to go to school to become a developer. And it's a great place, if you're living someplace else, to come to be a developer. So for all those reasons, we think the answer is strongly in the affirmative. It is a great place to be a developer. We're happy to be here. Really excited to see all of you here and excited to be part of it. Thank you very much.